everyone. It's a great packed house, which is wonderful. Welcome to the LinkedIn Speaker Series. Before I introduce our guests, I just wanted to remind people what the mission is of these events, and that is to bring inspiring ideas and people to both our employees and members so that you're more productive and successful in your careers. And we do have other speakers that you can access on our speakers.linkedin.com. And also new, so that you can make your commuting so much more enjoyable, you can actually get podcasts of past speakers, which is, I think, fabulous. So I would like to introduce Dan Roth. Everyone knows Dan, our executive editor, who is going to be moderating the discussion with our very esteemed guests, Jack and Suzy Welch, who are here today to talk about and for us to celebrate their new book, Real Life MBA. And it's a great discussion about your career and leadership. And one thing I'd just like to mention is that all the proceeds of their book are going to their foundation to help underprivileged high school students in college. So with that, I will leave it over to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, well, let's bring Jack and Suzy down here and we'll get started. Thanks, Catherine. Very much. You can sit here, Jack over there. Great. So we should start off by saying that Jack has laryngitis. So we'll still talk as much, but no one will be able to hear him. So just nod along, clap when it seems appropriate. Yeah. We have a tradition at LinkedIn that we typically start these off with a question about what's on your profile that people don't know, what special talent you have. We thought it might be fun to divvy it up between you guys. You okay doing that?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So Jack, do you want to start it off with something that is not on your LinkedIn profile?
I got a dog.
All right.
I bought a dog for 75 years, and then I got a dog, and I've had a dog for 6 months, and I'm pathetic. I miss my dog so much. I hate being here just for that reason, my dog. So I left my dog last night, and it's a big deal.
All right. I thought we had a picture. We can go on your Instagram, though, and see all the pictures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instagram's where you can see so many pictures of our dog.
Yes, sir. And remember, Instagram, dogs are okay on Instagram, not on LinkedIn, just as you're thinking about where to post things. Suzy, special talent?
I have a special talent. It's related to the dog, actually.
Oh.
All right, can I demonstrate it?
Please.
All right.
Wow.
Okay. That is a first.
That's great. And like 30 dogs from Mountain View are outside of the room trying to get in. I thought it'd be great to talk about a couple different things. First, your book is fantastic. It's a real lesson in how to understand how to be a better worker, how to be a better manager, and all the kind of things you could learn if you got an MBA but didn't want to spend the money doing it. So I thank you. I never got one. It's been very helpful to me. Maybe we'll start talking about the kind of state of the economic world today, and also what's going on with graduates, which I know both of you are thinking a lot about. In the paper in the New York Times this morning, there was a story about Uber's latest valuation, and the VC at the very end says, right now people are just trying to get so much money because we don't know what's going to come next, and the idea is it was a great quote: "The tide is high and nobody knows who's naked." So much growth. You're trying to, once the water goes down, we'll see where the flaws are. I'm curious how either of you would recommend companies grow and think about maintaining customers and employees, anticipating what might come down the road, that at some point the tide will go out.
No, you do it. Try, well, with what you've got, go for it.
Well, what I would say is there are 3 measurements you want to look at every time. And that's when you look at a company. You want to look at employee engagement. How hooked are the company's employees on the company? Are they into it all the way? Are they excited about coming to work every day? Are they engaged? The second one is customer satisfaction. You can look at a company, and if it's getting bad raps with its customers, they're naked. Mm-hmm. In the end, they're naked. And finally, cash flow. You look at those 3 things and forget everything else. You know those 3 things, you know what the status of a company is. If a company's hanging on to employees, they're losing employees, et cetera, that's a disaster. If customer satisfaction is ugly and you're reading about it on every social media, you know it's just the end is in sight. And of course, cash flow you can see every day in the reports.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you would narrow it down to those two. We're a company, obviously, that has an incredible amount of data that's flowing in all the time, and you can find data about anything. And would you argue that it makes, if you were in a company that's going through high growth, that all the rest of that data should not be stuff you're paying attention to? This all comes back to down to the
no, you
customers.
can find niches every time you get a piece of data. If you act on it, you can test it. You can A/B test anything. Okay,
Yeah.
so. But I think the more important thing is you can really understand from your employee engagement studies. You know, in the country today, 65% of the people, Gallup polls every week. Now, this isn't happening here or in the Valley probably, but 65% of the people at work in America today are disengaged. They don't like what they're doing. Since the recession, it hasn't gotten much better. It was 70%. Now it's 65. So imagine having a football team. See, I happen to believe that business is a game, just like sports. The team with the best players wins. So imagine going onto the playing field and 65% of your team is hanging out in the dugout. It'd be a hell of a hard time to win. But that's the status of most. We've been across the Midwest in this tour. We've been all through the East. We've been to every business school. And I'll tell you, the disengagement is enormous. Now, this is the first stop we've had on the West Coast, and it may be a lot different here. But the rest of the country is hurting in terms of that engagement, excitement, and turn on. And that's the job of all you managers here, is to be sure that your group is the fun place to hang out. Make it the place to hang out. And, you know, we use the analogy in the book, the cool kid's basement. Is your department or your group or your area the cool kid's basement? That's what you want to make it feel like. Fun to come.
It's so funny. I would not expect that from both of you. I mean, considering your background at GE, hard driving, industrial company, fast growth. You come from HBR background and really understanding the science behind management. The idea of developing a cool kid's basement instead of saying, come in every day, perform, 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 and get out, and come back the next day and do the same.
No, get out of here, Dennis. We had 94% engagement. When I started, we had 30% engagement. We had 94% when I retired.
You know why? Because Jack made work fun. I mean, not him alone. He would never let anybody say that. But what happened was he came in and said, work has got to be incredibly fun. If it's not fun, we're going to lose all the great people. The great people are going to have choices, and they're going to go where it's really fun. And so you want to make your place where there's growth and people are laughing and it's exciting to be. And so that whole idea of coming in every day, perform, 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 squeezing people, I mean, you're going to lose everybody great.
Yeah.
And they needed great people.
We used to say to everyone in the place, I don't know what LinkedIn's policy is, but we used to say, love to be here, but be ready to leave. And that put the heat on the bosses. And if we had people going out from one boss or another, for example, if we had a factory and a union was formed, I'd guarantee you the manager of the union of the plant was a horse's ass, for sure. And we had to go and deal with that person, not the people. So if you have that philosophy, then everybody has a challenge to make the team excited to be there.
I think it's sort of relevant to LinkedIn on one other level, which is both about the people who work here who are managers or hope to be managers, but also we spend a lot of time on LinkedIn because we write for LinkedIn and blah, 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 and we've got a kid who's looking for a job, so we're always sort of fishing on LinkedIn with him. And so it's that the people who are on LinkedIn are looking for places, some of them are looking for places to work, and so some of them are just looking for any job, but they also have this, you know, you're looking at companies, and the companies have this opportunity on LinkedIn to create a message about their culture.
Mm-hmm. But you also are, on the opposite end of the fun thing is this idea of be ready to get out. Mm-hmm. So how do you know if you want everyone to have fun and have a good time there, you also are constantly, you're a believer in the idea of constantly managing people out, letting people know where they stand, and do you still believe in this idea of 10%?
More than ever.
More than ever.
More than ever. Why would you ever, see if we're talking now about my theory that drives everybody nuts. Take care of the top 20, middle 70, we're working on improving them, and the bottom 10, let them know where they are and what they have to do to improve. That doesn't mean you go out with a firing squad that night, but you let them know if you don't pick up, here's what you got to do to improve. But you let them know. Nobody can ever be a manager and have somebody leave and say they're surprised. Can't happen. It's your job to make sure everybody knows transparently where they stand. And we have story after story of, you know, we ask people, and we won't do it here since we're guests, but we always ask people in large crowds. We've talked to over 1.25 million people in the last 10 years in Q&A sessions, and we ask them, how many of you know where you stand in your company? We don't get 10%. Imagine that. We only get 10% of the people know what their boss thinks of them.
We were at a speaking engagement in Chicago the other day, and it was like 500 or 600 people.
Yeah.
We got four hands, asking the audience, how many of you actually know where you stand in your company? So I think that's probably not true here. I think this is probably a very well-run company.
We don't know.
But just guessing. Trying to be polite.
Let's ask the question. How many of you feel like you know where you stand right now for your manager? Wow.
That's the best we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think that's 110%. Right.
You're all scared it's on tape.
I
know. All their managers are here. That's the issue.
But most people go to work and they don't have that experience at all. We had
a story about daughter.
Our daughter works in Hollywood at a very reputable company, and she was working her rear end off, really working hard, and she had no idea where she stood. We would ask her, having us as parents is just a dreadful deal, okay? So we would ask her regularly, how you doing? Do you know how you're doing? And she would say, well, he smiled at me today, or he frowned at me today, or he was mad at me today, and she never knew. So then one day she calls us and she's exultant because she got a raise in the mail, her pay stub. She got a raise. And she calls us and she's overjoyed. And so we said to her, yeah, wow, that's fantastic, honey. That's great. Why? And she said, I don't know. I don't know. We said, well, you got to go find out. No, he'll be mad if I ask him. No, you got to go find out. So she finally, because we were pressuring her, went in and said, oh, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I got a raise. That was so great. Bye. And so he looked at her and he said to her, merit. And that was it.
Merit, try merit on.
She fled the office, and she was so happy. She called us up and said, "It's merit, it's merit." And we're like, "Oh, that's great." So and she's since then been promoted. So clearly, she's doing well. She doesn't really know what she does well and what she doesn't do well.
So what's the secret then? She's
a great girl.
I'm sure she's doing everything perfect. How do you then? What should you be telling there's two questions. Number one is how do you tell employees what they need to be measured on? Is it the kind of thing where you say you have a year out? Here is what you need to achieve in a year. Do you believe more in quarterly, weekly?
Okay. But I think what the discipline is, at least I like this one. You can throw it away, but it's an idea anyway. Take a card, write. On the left-hand side, here's what I like about what you're doing. Here's what you can do to improve on the right-hand side. And write it by hand and sit with the person across the table 4 times a year, every quarter. I did that. I had 29 direct reports, and I do it now in private equity with all these companies. I do it in my school with the faculty. We basically, every 3 months, tell them, here's what we like about what you're doing. Here's what you got to do to improve. And we have a good dialogue, 15, 20 minutes about that card. And it brings it to life. Mm-hmm. I don't think you have an obligation. You can't call yourself a leader if your people are coming in puzzled about where you stand and where your trajectory is taking you.
But hasn't this kind of approach turned so many companies into, you hear reports about what life is like inside Yahoo or in Microsoft, where stack ranking has turned people, I know you don't like that term, turn people against each other, where managers play games.
That's nonsense. Hold it. You put on one axis, what are the values or the behaviors? Business is all about a mission. Where are you going? Then how are you going to get there? That's the behaviors. Mm-hmm. And then the consequences, if you do it right or wrong. But if you start with that, how are you going to get there? If teamwork has got to be a behavior. You can't be in the top 20 if you have bad teamwork. You're in the bottom 10.
Yeah, the mistake comes when people think that this stack ranking, which we don't like to use that term, but what the problem comes is when people think it's about the numbers.
Yeah.
It's not. It's about your behaviors and your performance.
And the numbers,
right.
Both.
Take 4 axes, 4 quadrants. High performance, you got a graph, high performance, good numbers, and great behaviors, just the type of person you want. That's easy. Onward and upward. Promote them forever. And then you look at the type 2, no performance in numbers, and no behaviors. That's easy too. They have to go. And then type 3 is the person that's having a tough time getting performance, but has all the behaviors you want on your team, buys in, is engaged, and everything else. That person you're going to give a second chance and a third chance. It's the type 4 that kills the company. Kills it. You talk about behaviors, you talk about all that, and then you got a horse's ass who makes numbers. And everybody says, one more quarter, come on, give me one more quarter.
Right.
And once you do that, you're dead.
So do you need to get rid of, so people, you have high performers, you have incredible people who are, the unicorns,
you
gotta get rid of them?
They pollute and poison the company.
You got to get rid of them.
They're polluters.
Even though they're great, even though they're helping you meet all of
But they don't meet the objectives in the long term.
Yeah.
They don't have speed or urgency or teamwork. They're and you can't make a
Don't
speech.
share ideas.
You can't make a speech about what your company's values are if you keep people who don't have the values and promote them and say, "Yay, we love your numbers."
And that's where all the dopes miss how when you go 20, 70, 10.
Right.
It's not just numbers. It's the culture. They buy into the culture and they make the numbers.
So is it frustrating to you to get lumped into that whenever these stories come up?
No, because I got 24 private equity companies and we use it every day and they're blowing it through. We haven't had one bust in the whole recession. Everything works fine. It worked at GE for a long time. It works.
Jack likes that it's controversial because it gives him a chance to talk about it constantly.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to keep bringing it up until your voice is totally gone.
Please talk about it more.
Let's talk about you mentioned the recession. We've talked about the speaking tour you're on. What are you seeing? I think in Silicon Valley, we're obviously in a little bit of a different world than the rest of the country. What are you seeing in terms of graduates? What are you seeing in terms of what companies are going through right now?
Go ahead.
And what's important for us to know?
Yeah, look, there's 1.8 million kids graduate from college every year. And the economy is growing 1.5%. And so if you are a bright, shiny engineer from one of these fabulous schools, you have your pick of job offers, but that is not the way it is in most places, and it's tough, it's rough. And now, you could say, well, they made their own bed, and so they've got to sleep in it. But if you're a liberal arts graduate, if you're majoring in history and you're going to a no-name school or a state school or whatever, you're going to end up, I think, 73% of college graduates end up in a field not of their study, and some of them, too many of them, at minimum wage. I mean, that is brutal, okay? Especially when your parents have spent 4 years of college or you've taken on a huge amount of debt. And so it's very, very tough, and it's going to have long-term implications because eventually people are not going to take on debt for these dead-end jobs, and it's going to end up changing the way college looks today. But you're really insulated from it out here, and these are fabulous companies that are out here, and the kids who graduate, our son went to Stanford, it's a totally different experience for them.
But we are also a company that is designed to make people better and more successful at what they do, and one of it's going to be either getting them employed or helping them get the skills they need. What do you think that we should know as a company in terms of what the rest of the world is like? What do these kids need? What do the schools need? What can we as a company provide? Have you given that any thought?
I think less the company than the whole economy. We need to grow. We need policies that drive growing. Every time we come up with a new regulation, a new activity, we got to say, does this help or hurt jobs? This country needs to grow. I mean, it's in terrible. It's beautiful here, but you go to the Midwest and see those manufacturing companies grinding it out. It's tough, man. It's really tough.
Is your acquisition of Linda done?
It's not done yet. It's
but
close.
I would say that's just a fantastic acquisition, my humble opinion. But just because when a kid comes out and they're looking at a job, I've just had this experience looking and saw actually, this job requires knowing how to edit in iMovie and being able to go right to Linda and being able to take it. I think that's a great synergistic thing that you can do as a company, what you've already done with this great acquisition.
Great. Let's talk about education. You wrote this book in a large way because what you felt frustrated a little bit in the state of the MBA. Can you talk a little bit what exactly drove you to want to do this?
We didn't want to write a book. That's basically the bottom line. We wrote Winning 10 years ago, and then we went on and we had many different ways actually to continue to communicate stuff that we had been learning. Jack had private equity, and then he started a business school online, and we had to give speeches, and we had a lot of stuff going on. But over the past 10 years, we've really traveled around the world several times, and as Jack said, we calculated about 1.25 million people we've spoken to in groups large and small, and we had learned a lot, and it was inescapable that a lot had changed. Stuff had changed about the world from when we wrote Winning in 2005. And we knew a sort of codified bunch of stuff, and that we also felt that not everyone can go to business school and take the 2 years off, spend the money, take 2 years away from their job. And so we were sort of, our publisher approached us and said, you know, there's no MBA in a box, really. There's no book that's an MBA. And we said, no, until one day we sort of thought, well, maybe we can do that. And so we closed our eyes and said yes and jumped off the cliff.
All right.
So that's how it came to be.
But you also have a school that is designed to bring the cost down of the MBA.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have an online school, a 100% online school called the Jack Welch Management Institute. We've got 900 students, 900 MBAs, and we're growing 40% a year. And the proposition is, again, back to customer satisfaction, employee engagement. In our school, the average age is 38. 65% of them get promoted while they're in school. So they're learning. The idea is you learn on Monday, you practice it on Tuesday, you share the results on Friday. It's almost like a business trade school, if you will, in the ugliest form of it. But it's really teaching you how to do the things you do in business, not sitting around in a pub afterwards talking about the case. And so there's a lot of real lives. It costs $39,000, and you're still gaining your salary. It's fully accredited like every other school. But the thing is, the student is the customer. Now, how many schools do you think the student is the customer? It's always the faculty. You know, we take our kids to college, and we go for the indoctrination week, and we go 2 days usually. They bring out the dean. Then they bring out the associate dean. Then they bring out the assistant to the associate dean. They get more overhead per square inch than you've ever seen in your life. It's all about the faculty. And we think it's all about the student. So our students do an NPS score. You know NPS, customer satisfaction. They do an NPS twice a semester. If the teacher gets 2 of those bad, they're gone. No tenure. Tenure is a foul word in our league. It's swearing. And they have to perform like everybody else. And we have a top 20, middle 70, bottom 10 faculty. And we talk to them about that all the time.
Do you think this is the future of education?
I don't know, but it is for us.
Right. But you have kids with so much student debt. I mean,
education is so locked in. I mean, come on. It's an institution that hasn't changed in 150 years. The teacher gets up, bops the stuff at you, the student writes it down, and regurgitates it back.
Right.
That's what it is. And if they and they're not prepared in many ways. I mean, kids, for example, new graduates, very often we see them at work in our companies. They do the homework. You're taught to do the homework, right? You give the homework, you give it back. That's not over-delivering. You've got to make your boss smarter, wider, bigger. You've got to get new perspective. Doing the homework is not even close to enough. And yet kids over and over again do the homework at the job. And that isn't enough.
They have to learn the hard way.
But do you think that this is, I mean, you are on the cutting edge of this right now. You talked about
one,
Linda.
it's one
and
part.
You're touring schools right now. I'm curious, I mean, you must be seeing this going on.
Well, I mean, they are going at snail's pace. We go and see them, and they ask us, they come and see our thing.
Right.
And they sort of, online, you know. And people say, this is an online for-profit school. That's even dirtier. Okay, now, but they say, why don't you give your brand to a big, important school? What the big, important school would do for me is they'd allow me to give them $1 million or $2 million or $10 million, and then they'd allow me to put my name over a door, and then they wouldn't allow me to touch the curriculum. Not even touch it. It's locked in. Even in our school now, we have to fight to get through faculty rules and regulations to teach what we want to teach, which is how to hire, how to fire, how to motivate, how to lead, how to do all these things. And
That's great, thanks.
And do you now look back at you taught at MIT for years.
Yep.
Suzy, you spent a long time at Harvard.
Yep.
Do you see either of those schools changing?
No,
No.
Those schools.
No, those are top tier schools. They got a deal.
They don't have to touch anything.
Yeah.
They got a brand that is untouchable. Stanford, places like that, they're not going to be. They can go to sleep for 50 years.
Because they've got recruiters going there. Okay, so as long as you've got the recruiters showing up, you don't have to change that business model. People go to those top tier schools because they want to do a sharp left or right hand turn in their career. So you're doing really, really well, and then you think, I'm doing great, I'm going to get into a great business school because I want to leap from banking to blank or whatever, or something to banking. You go to those schools, the recruiters come to you, and you get signed up, and that model works. But it works for the top 10 to 20 schools. And everything below that, like, not to pick on any school, but like the University of Maryland Business School or University of Delaware Business School, they're going to have to change their model probably. But those top tier schools, no.
They've got it made. I mean, they don't need to touch a thing. Every person here will look like if they don't already have it, a Stanford degree, a MIT degree, you
can say it, Harvard.
Harvard. No, but that's not going to change forever. Right. And they don't have to. They're doing fine.
And this is an area where there's certainly a lot of people in Silicon Valley who believe that a college education is overrated, that the idea of even finishing your degree or even starting it is something that is probably maybe not worth the time. You have to think about the ROI. Where do you guys stand on that?
Well, we have a lot. I mean, you have a handful of examples and a lot of press.
Right.
Our son almost didn't want to finish college. He came home, he got a great job, and he was doing incredibly well. This was during a summer job in the music business, and they loved him. And he came home one day from work, and he said, I love it. Guess what? I'm going to quit college, because, it's sort of cool now. I'm going to quit college and start working right now. They'll have me. And we were like, oh, no, you're not. You're going right back.
No,
he wasn't,
his area of destiny.
Right, he was in his, because he had found what we call area of destiny, which we write about in the book. And again, for this crowd, I don't know how interesting it will be, but just briefly, we have this construct. Look, when we're on the tour, a lot of times people come up to us and they're successful or they're working, and they'll say, what should I be doing with my life? I just have this feeling I'm working, but I'm not doing what I should be doing with my life. What should I do with my life? And so we start this sort of series of questions, but where we've come to is we talk to them about this idea of area of destiny, and just think about it this way. Think about your life as two superhighways, okay? On one of these superhighways is what you're uniquely good at. And this is a little hard in a room like this because you're all good at a lot of stuff. But if you can think about what you're uniquely good at, and it can be like making strangers feel comfortable or solving math equations with 4 variables if that exists. I mean, there's just something, like I'm good about writing about business, but something you're uniquely good at that most people are not as good at as you. And on the other superhighway is what you really love doing. So if you think about your month that just went by, was it like, what did you really love doing? Was it with a group of people? Was it reading alone? Was it solving a problem? Was it traveling? And if you intersect those two, that beautiful real estate, that territory is where you should be building your career. And sometimes it's very hard to get there because momentum takes you someplace else. And you can be 45, and we've met a lot of people who are 45 or 50. We met a guy who worked in Jack's private equity companies, and he was a manager in a car rental business. Every time we saw him, we thought he was going to burst out of his suit. One, because he was like the most ripped guy you ever met, but the other was because he was like out of his mind. He couldn't believe he was in this place, but he was a pretty good manager in a car company, but he had ended up there by momentum. One job led to another job, led to another job.
Well, he lived a $600,000 job.
Yeah, he made $600,000 a year. Pretty hard to dump that job, right? But on the weekends, he just lived for the weekends, because he was a marathoner and a triathlete, and he trained people for fun, and he lived and breathed for what he was eating and drinking, and then one thing led to another, and he got offered a huge job at Equinox, and he just boom, blew up his life. 3 kids, moved them across the country, moved to Dallas, took a big pay cut, now he's like the number 2 or 3 guy there. He is the happiest person on earth. He is totally in his area of destiny. What he's uniquely good at, which is sports and athletics, and what he loves doing, right in the middle of it. And he's so happy. And most people get there by age 45 or 50, but it takes a lot of destruction sometimes if you've been having a momentum thing. So we talk about getting there early.
But what's the answer? If you need to get a job, if you have to pick one, is there one path to go, one superhighway to start on?
the good news is that your strength, what you're uniquely good at, typically is quite close to what you love doing. People tend to gravitate towards what they're good at.
Because they're reinforced in that.
They're reinforced in that. So you don't usually have to pick between the two.
Great. We're going to open up to questions here in a minute. So if you have questions, if you want to start lining up at the microphones, that'd be great, and we'll call them up. Can you guys tell us, you're so popular on, I have to ask a home turf question. You're so popular on LinkedIn, you do incredibly well. What's your writing process like? How does it work?
So you always talk about it. Go ahead.
Oh, Jack, I feel like
my voice.
I know. I don't mean to hog it. I mean, do you want me to? We have a writing process. We invented it about 12 or 15 years ago because we had to. We tried a lot of things, but what ended up working was we get an idea. So we get an idea for a column for LinkedIn. Which we love writing for LinkedIn very much. We love the readers on LinkedIn more than any other place that we've published. We love your users. They are so thoughtful and great. And so we get an idea, and we talk about it till we cannot talk about it anymore. We talk about it driving places, coming home, making dinner. We just talk about it exhaustively. And I'm taking a lot of notes, and I'm sort of asking back and forth. And then after we're done talking about it, I go to a room we call the cave, and I create the first draft. And then I come out with the first draft, and I give it to Jack, and I try not to be in the room when he's reading it. That's just a dreadful experience. So, but I'll drop it on his desk, and then I sort of circle around, and I come in, and he's sort of like watching the Red Sox, and I'll say, have you finished it yet? And then I'll circle around. And then he's done, and I stand there for my performance evaluation. And, and so it goes anywhere from good job, which means like we have like 15 more drafts.
No, that's a book.
Okay,
that's a book.
That's if you're doing a book. Okay, if it's a LinkedIn column, it's going to be less. Or he'll say, like in this particular book, when I handed him one chapter, he said, "Okay, we have work to do." That was 68 drafts. Not that I was counting every single draft, but says, it can be. So that's how we do it, and back and forth. And it's really iterative.
Are you taking ideas from the commenters, or are the commenters there?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do.
And I'll tell you, the commenters are really helpful. But to be candid, we love LinkedIn because it's our best source of students. They're learners. The LinkedIn readers on these columns are real learners. It's the majority of our leads, and we go to all kinds of other sources to get leads, and we've now dropped them to stay with LinkedIn because you deliver high-quality learners.
Yeah.
That's great. It's a very aspirational crowd we found,
really
at least around the
Yeah.
country. That's great. Gwen.
Hi, Suzy. Hi, Jack. My name's Molly. Thanks for coming. Great to hear from you. I was this weekend following a feed about Tony Hsieh at Zappos holacracy movement and how, I think it was a third or something of the staff took the offer to leave because they didn't really fit in or want to do this radical work of eliminating middle management. Self-organizing system sounds really cool to me, but I've never experienced it. I've spent my life kind of dreading middle managers. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that model, and obviously it's radical, I understand, but I just really do want to hear, Jack, especially you with your time at GE, and Suzy, your experience studying other organizations, if you think it's doable or
Great
no.
question.
Yeah.
You follow the holacracy movement?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And 14% of everybody walked out. So
Yeah.
Look, middle management is less required today with social media. Everybody knows everything anyway. Business it's got to be transparent, and having a stripe on your epaulet is not give you any better brain than somebody below you. So we're all fighting to get rid of layers. But 25 years ago, I was writing, layers are evil. Every one of you that gives a layer in order to make somebody feel better, and they end up having 5 people report to them, you want as many people as possible reporting to somebody. Otherwise, the people meddle. They're not busy enough. You want them so busy. You want to give them their heads. So I had 29 direct reports, as I said before, and I always thought this idea of 7 or 8 is nonsense. Let people have their head, let them go, give them their rope. If they deliver, fine. And so I'm all for less. We used to have, when I became CEO of GE, try this one on for size, I was level 29. When I started, I was level 4. So I had to go through 20 years of going from 4 to 29. I mean, it's stupid. People would move across the country from New York to Chicago to elsewhere to get another level because you have different pay bands. So that's the old days. Now, the more people, I encourage everything they're doing to be more transparent and fewer layers.
I think we have time for a couple more questions, and then we're going to cut it off. Go ahead.
Hi, I have a question from the stream. What best practices would you suggest the current American political system adopts from well-run corporations?
What can the political system today learn from companies? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one, delayer. Layering is all over the federal government. I mean, you look at the size of the federal government, and in my view of life, drive more to the states and counties, cities, etc. More decision-making closer to the work. It's true in business every day. The people closest to the work know the work best. So why would we have a Department of Education telling us, a town in Ohio, what to do? They know the people, they know the situation. So everything local. Less federal, more local is my view.
Great.
Thank you. I have one more from Brett Wallace in New York, and he says, 10 years ago I bumped into Jack at a Red Sox game and asked him for advice for new leaders. And he said, be yourself. He shot back. Could he share why he thinks that's so important?
You gave Brett Wallace, who ran into you at a baseball game as a LinkedIn employee, you said, what's the one piece of advice? You said, be yourself. Why did you give him that piece of advice? First of all, I'm sure you remember that.
Well, I immediately loved him, but I mean, basically, I think we have to be authentic. Authenticity is the root of it all. You can't be some pompous ass around acting a certain way. You got to be who you are. Now, if you're a pompous ass, you're in trouble.
That's who you are.
But I mean, fundamentally, you got to be yourself. Don't, like we always say about mentoring, don't grab one mentor. Don't grab one person. Everyone's a mentor. Everyone in this row knows something I don't know. Everybody here. If I could just get that kernel of wisdom from each one of them, I'd be smarter. And you got to look at everyone as a mentor. Everyone. Somebody speaks better than you. Somebody writes better than you. Somebody hires better than you. Find out how they do it. But don't get stuck with a mentor or one piece of advice.
Right. And the way that links to being yourself is that when you are yourself, then you're very free to learn from everybody because you're not sort of defending yourself like, okay, I am this persona. You are just a person who's always learning, and you just bring your full self to work. And it's just going to make life a lot more enjoyable for everyone around you, and to not be a phony. The phonies, that's it. Ugh, that's the end as a leader. And I would say one other thing that hasn't come up here is if that conversation at Fenway Park happened today, and somebody said, Jack, how can I be a leader? You would say, I'm sure you'd say, be authentic. But then you would talk about the generosity gene, which is an idea that we first started writing about it 5 years ago, but Jack started thinking about it about 6-7 years ago, which is because he's asked a lot about what makes somebody a good leader. He started really looking around at the people he thought were great leaders, and one day he said to me, I've got it. It's this generosity gene. And I immediately said, I'm not sure it's a gene, dear, because as the editor, I was sort of already thinking ahead. But it's this characteristic, and it's this propensity to want to have a generosity of spirit where you really want to promote people, you really want your people to get more money and to grow and to get better at stuff, and that you are really excited about growing your team. And it's not about you, it's about pouring your energy into them so that they can grow. And that is what distinguishes a good leader from a mediocre leader, this generosity gene, this propensity towards it.
And give yourself a test now. You've all had different bosses at different times in your life. Have you had a boss with a generosity gene, and have you also had somebody that stole ideas, that didn't love seeing you promoted, that didn't want? You know the type of boss you want to work for. You want to give the extra mile to. You want to do all that stuff for. Climb the hill, be engaged, all those words. But they go with somebody who's got your back and is taking care of you and loves to see you promoted, loves to see you grow. It's one of the most exciting things you're going to see in people. Seeing employees that you know, and you knew it 10 years ago. we have 51 CEOs that work for me now, with CEOs of major companies out there. That's a huge turn on. Boeing, Honeywell, Home Depot, etc. It's exciting as hell. That's the turn on.
Well, you've been incredibly generous with your time. Thank you so much. You guys both have the gene. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.